Hello, I am Dr. Kaushik Mukhopadhyay and I am going to continue my discussion on pharmacotherapy of diabetes mellitus. We have already discussed the biochemistry and pharmacology of insulin. In the last class, we discussed about the diabetic ketoacidosis, the pathophysiology and management, and today we will discuss about oral anti-diabetic drugs. So, let's start. So here is the list of oral antidiabetic drugs that is used nowadays. One of the major important category of drugs are the insulin secretagogues. That is, the drugs which increases insulin release from pancreatic beta cell. One of the important drugs from this category are sulfonylureas, and there are some other non-sulfonylurea which also increases insulin secretion. There are classes like biguanides, in which metformin is the one of the most important drug, which acts by decreasing hepatic glucose production. There is alpha glucosidase inhibitors. Their mechanism of action is mostly decrease glucose absorption from intestine by inhibition of alpha glucosidase. Then there are drugs which acts by acting on incretin system like exenatide, that is not listed in this slide. They basically increase the action of incretins. Now, how they act we will discuss in the later part of this class. And dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors, these are oral drugs which prolongs the endogenous GLP-1 action. GLP-1 is the most important incretins. So in the first class we discussed the incretins are the hormones that is released from GI tract and increases insulin release. And they have other actions also, but most important action is insulin release. So these incretins, endogenous incretins, have very short duration of action, and these DPP4 inhibitors, they prolong the action of GLP-1. Next is sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitors, SGLT2 inhibitors in short. They increase renal glucose excretion. And lastly, thiazolidinediones. This group of drugs, it decrease insulin resistance and also increase glucose utilization. So mainly their action is on peripheral tissues like adipose tissue and muscle cell. Important drug is pioglitazone. So this is the classification of the full oral antidiabetic drugs. There are some other drugs also, but these are the most important drugs. So let's look at the drug in each group. Sulfonylurea, there is two generations, tolbutamide and chlorpropamide. This is the first generation, and chlorpropamide, it is a very long acting drug, but nowadays these first generations are not used. Mainly the second generation drugs are used like glimepiride, gliclazide, glipizide, drugs like this. Non-sulfonylurea insulin secretagogues and nataglinide. Biguanides are metformin. Alpha glucosidase inhibitor, importance are acarbose, voglibose. DPP4 inhibitor, it ends with gliptin. So sitagliptin, saxagliptin, linagliptin, vildagliptin. SGLT2 inhibitors are canagliflozin and empagliflozin. So it ends with gliflozin. And thiazolidinediones, it ends with glitazone. So pioglitazone and rosiglitazone. Now the drugs that is mentioned in red, these are discontinued. Fenformin has been discontinued due to very high incidence of lactic acidosis. Rosiglitazone has been discontinued in India for the complaint of increased cardiovascular mortality. And the drugs that is mentioned in green are the drugs you must remember. The name you should try to remember all the names, but if you have to remember at least two drugs from each group, then you try to remember those that is mentioned in green. Now these are parenteral antidiabetic drugs. Insulin we have discussed in very detail. I am not going to discuss in today's discussion. Amylin agonists are drugs which is given parenterally, and they basically slow the gastric emptying. So The hyperglycemia just after meal, that does not occur, and it also inhibits glucagon secretion. The drug is pramlintide. Pramlintide, but it is not very much used in India, especially it is not a very first line drug. If it is not, the diabetes is not controlled with the first line drugs, then we go for this kind of drug. And GLP-1 receptor agonist, very important, exenatide and liraglutide. They are agonists of GLP-1 receptor. So we have endogenous GLP-1, but it is very short acting. So we give GLP-1 receptor agonists like exenatide and liraglutide. These are long-acting GLP-1 receptor agonists. Now, at a glance, this slide shows different drugs mechanism of action. So this is the circulatory system, and suppose there is increased glucose and increased free fatty acid, and our motto for diabetes mellitus management is to decrease the level of glucose here. So how different drugs act? First, the biguanides, that is metformin. It inhibits the production of glucose by neoglucogenesis from liver. Second is adipose tissue. It releases free fatty acids. Thiazolidinediones block this part. So it increases glucose absorption in the adipose tissue as well as free fatty acid release is inhibited. Muscle reuptake in the glucose reuptake in the muscle by increased action of GLUT4. This is promoted by thiazolidinedione as well as metformin. Absorption of glucose from intestine, it is inhibited by alpha glucosidase inhibitor. SGLT2 inhibitor, it increases renal excretion of glucose. And insulin secretagogues, that means increased insulin release, that is done by sulfonylureas and non-sulfonylureas, and also DPP4 inhibitor. So these are insulin secretagogues. So this is the, in a nutshell, this is the mechanism of action of most important anti-diabetic drugs. So now we will look into each drug. So I think you can remember this diagram from the first class. So this was the mechanism of how insulin was released after a meal. So meal means more amount of glucose is present in the blood. So this glucose enters into the body via GLUT1 or GLUT2 receptor. It is converted into glucose 6-phosphate. With this glucose 6-phosphate forms ATP. This all is happening in pancreatic beta cell. This ATP blocks the ATP sensitive potassium channel. So potassium cannot go out of the cell. So there is transient depolarization, and this transient depolarization opens up calcium channel, and this calcium channel is a voltage gated calcium channel. So slight depolarization causes influx of calcium, and you know that calcium release helps in exocytosis of insulin as well as C-peptide. So this calcium will help in release of insulin. Now how sulfonylureas work? They inhibit this potassium channel. So all the insulin secretagogues mostly, they act by similar mechanism, by inhibition of this ATP sensitive potassium channel. Sulfonylureas as well as non-sulfonylureas insulin secretagogues, they act by this mechanism. DPP4 inhibitors, they also increase insulin release, but they act by GLP-1 receptor pathway. So they inhibits the breakdown of GLP-1, but that is a separate thing. But the sulfonylureas, insulin secretagogues, they act by inhibition of ATP sensitive potassium channel. But the major adverse reaction for this, if something is releasing more amount of insulin, that means the most common adverse effect that you can assume is hypoglycemia. So more insulin will be released and hypoglycemia will occur. So sulfonylureas are always given just before meal, and you should always tell the patient, do not miss your meal after you take sulfonylureas, otherwise hypoglycemia can occur. Now I have already told you there are two generations. First is tolbutamide and chlorpropamide. These are first generation, and second generation are gliclazide, glimepiride and glipizide. Adjustment needed in renal and liver disease because sulfonylureas are mostly metabolized in liver, but they are excreted via kidney. So in both the cases, the renal and liver disease, you have to adjust the dose, or you may require to change that drug into alternative drugs. Newer agents, that is the second generation, are more potent. That is the major advantage of second generation. They are more potent. Like glimepiride is almost 100 times more potent than tolbutamide. So they are more potent and they have better safety profile. And there are some drugs like glimepiride has some additional action like antioxidant action, and they have some vascular benefits also, but it is not proved very much. But they have some antioxidant action like glimepiride and to some extent glibenclamide. But the problem is that they cause weight gain. This group of drugs cause weight gain. But very important factor, especially in developing countries like us in India, these are inexpensive. So these are very cheap drug. So most of the patient in India, unless there is any major comorbidities, they usually started with metformin. If a patient comes with hyperglycemia or diabetes mellitus, we start with metformin, and if the blood glucose level is more, then we start with a sulfonylurea and metformin combination. So the thing will how to treat a patient, that we will discuss in the next class in much detail. But remember, in country like us, the sulfonylureas are very cheap drug and they are used in very high amount. And another problem of sulfonylurea is that you can see there is sulfur group. So if a patient has adverse the allergy in sulfur drugs, better you have to avoid this group of drugs, sulfonylurea. Another problem is that it has very high amount of drug-drug interactions. There are so many drugs like antifungals and proton pump inhibitors, corticosteroids. They have drug-drug interactions with this group of drugs, especially because they are metabolized in liver. So any drug that alters the metabolism, the hepatic metabolism by CYP system, will alter the concentration of sulfonylurea, and the effect of sulfonylurea will also get altered. Next, most important drug probably, and the first drug to be prescribed to a patient is metformin. Metformin, again, it is an inexpensive drug, very cheap drug and weight neutral, and sometimes it can also cause weight reduction but in a very few individuals, but mostly it is weight neutral drug. And it do not cause hypoglycemia because it is not an insulin secretagogue. The most important way that it acts is by decrease of hepatic glucose production, so inhibition of gluconeogenesis. So this figure shows the mechanism of action of metformin. Metformin is the only drug from biguanides class that is in the market. So metformin enters the hepatocyte. This is an hepatocyte. So this is happening inside a hepatocyte. So metformin enters the hepatocyte by a channel called OCT1. Then it enters the mitochondria and inhibit the complex 1, which is an important part of electron transport chain. So as effect of inhibition of complex 1, there is increased AMP level and increased ATP level and decreased ATP level. So ATP is decreased and AMP is increased. This altered ratio inhibits different steps of gluconeogenesis. So you can see here different steps of gluconeogenesis is inhibited. Especially this high amount of AMP that will inhibit the gluconeogenesis. Now this high amount of AMP will also activate AMPK, that is AMP dependent protein kinase. which will ultimately lead to increased fatty acid oxidation and decreased lipogenesis. So ultimately there will be decreased glucose production, increased fatty acid oxidation and decreased lipogenesis with the effect of this AMP kinase pathway and decreased ATP related pathway. There is another way metformin works, that is mitochondrial glycerol phosphate dehydrogenase MGPD pathway, and it alters the redox status, that is the oxidative status inside the hepatocyte, and it ultimately inhibits the glycerol kinase pathway, that is formation of glucose from glycerol, that is also inhibited by this MGPD pathway. Now taken together, ultimately there is less hepatic glucose production. Now this all happens in the hepatocytes. There is also another proposed phenomenon that metformin increases glucose utilization in the muscle and adipose tissue, mainly in the muscle. So this is this also probably done by AMPK pathway, but it is not very much, the pathway is not very much understood. Metformin should be used cautiously in patients of renal insufficiency and hospitalized patients, because there is chance of lactic acidosis in those patients. Usually metformin is given in 1 gram twice daily dose, and it can be given up to 2550 milligram dose, but after 2 gram daily dose the plateau is reached, and you should avoid this in hepatic dysfunction. Metformin is a very important drug for the management of all the diabetic patients unless there is a contraindication, and it is also used in PCOD, that means polycystic ovarian disease, and weight, especially in those patients with weight loss and infertility. So high weight gain and infertility present and patients with PCOS, sometimes they are given metformin. Next, alpha glucosidase inhibitors. Now these are very easy to understand their mechanism of action. It simply inhibits the alpha glucosidase, which is an enzyme in the intestine which breaks oligosaccharides into monosaccharides, and these monosaccharides are absorbed and it causes postprandial hyperglycemia. So if a patient is suffering from mainly postprandial hyperglycemia, these drugs can be prescribed. So you can see that if you give alpha glucosidase inhibitors like acarbose, voglibose, they will inhibit the AG and the amount of monosaccharides formed is decreased. So the postprandial hyperglycemia will also get decreased. But the problem is the oligosaccharides, they will draw water and there will be bloating. So patient will complain of GI flatulence, and there is some cases of elevated liver function tests. So this is mainly the problem is GI related, because the mechanism of action is totally GI related, and it is relatively modest glucose lowering drugs. These are not first line drugs. If the blood glucose level is not controlled by other drugs, then we can add this kind of drug. Now the function of GLP-1 analogs. Now GLP or glucagon-like peptide, these are secreted by intestines. Now basically the precursor of glucagon and GLP-1 are almost the same. They are formed from a same protein, and during the splicing stage or the post-transcriptional modification stage, the GLP-1 and glucagon are different from each other. It has multiple functions. The most important function that is related to diabetes mellitus is the increased insulin release and decreased glucagon production. It also inhibits beta cell apoptosis. So the function on pancreas, this is the main function of incretins. GLP-1 is an incretin. Incretin I have already told in the first class that these are hormones that are secreted from the intestines and which helps in increasing insulin release. It has also it has many other functions throughout the body. It decreases gastric emptying, it decreases albumin excretion from the kidney, it increases insulin sensitivity in the peripheral tissue, especially in the voluntary muscle. It decreases gluconeogenesis, it decreases appetite, so patient will take less food and there will be less postprandial hyperglycemia. It has also some neuroprotection involved, and it has also some cardioprotective and vasodilatation property. It helps in bone formation. So you can see there are multiple beneficial role throughout the body of the incretins, and that is why incretins system is a very important target of management of diabetes mellitus, and not only the target of control of blood glucose, but also the different adverse effects or complications of diabetes mellitus can be controlled by this mechanism. So how we can increase the action of GLP-1? There may be two ways. First, in the body, GLP-1 only has only action for 1 to 2 minutes, but we can give some long-acting GLP-1 which will act on GLP-1 receptor but will not be degraded as easily as endogenous GLP-1. So for this we can give drugs like exenatide or liraglutide, which will stay in the body and will function as GLP-1. All these functions they will perform. Alternatively, we can prevent breakdown of GLP-1, the endogenous GLP-1, by some drug. GLP-1 is broken down by dipeptidyl peptidase 4, DPP4. If we give the inhibitor of DPP4, then GLP-1 duration of action will increase. So that is how we can increase the action of GLP-1. So you can see in this slide how DPP4 inhibitors not only increase the glucose insulin level and decrease glucose level, but also it has multiple neuroprotective, nephroprotective and other vasculoprotective action. So these are all the different complications, microvascular and macrovascular complications of diabetes mellitus, the neuropathy, nephropathy, foot ulcers and retinopathy. We will discuss about this in the next class. But for today, you understand that the DPP4 inhibitor, they have multiple roles throughout the body. It has beneficial actions on lipid metabolism. It has increased NO activity, that is vasodilatory property. It has anti-inflammatory property. It increases BNP and lowers blood pressure. And it has also favorable action on bone or calcium metabolism. All these taken together, they help in prevention of complications of diabetes mellitus. Important drugs are sitagliptin, saxagliptin, vildagliptin. Linagliptin is a very long-acting DPP4 inhibitor. You can give it once daily, and sometimes it can give thrice per weekly. Teneligliptin is a very cheap drug. It is a new drug. It is developed in Japan, and usually the DPP4 inhibitors are relatively costly drug, but teneligliptin cost is much less than the others. But it is not till FDA approved. So you can see here the prolonged section. So everything I have discussed already, relatively modest glucose lowering. So the amount of glucose it lowers, it is not as significant as sulfonylureas, but overall its beneficial effects in the patients of diabetes mellitus is very useful. Next group is thiazolidinediones, pioglitazone and rosiglitazone. Rosiglitazone, it is not used nowadays. It is banned in India due to increased cardiovascular mortality. Pioglitazone is used nowadays it is continuing to be used, but with some question mark. Question mark like it has probably has a risk of bladder cancer. So it has a black box warning. You should tell your patient that if he has family history of bladder cancer, you should not prescribe these drugs. And these drugs have propensity to fluid retention. So you have to avoid in a patients with already suffering from heart failure. The mechanism of action is the activation of peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma, PPAR gamma. There is another receptor similar is the PPAR alpha, but it is distinct from that. It is PPAR gamma and it is mostly related with the glucose and fatty acid metabolism. So how they act? Thiazolidinedione enters the adipose tissue and it activates this PPAR gamma. These are transcription factors and they modify the gene expression and transcription. It decreases lipolysis and decreases free fatty acids. And it also has some anti-inflammatory property like TNF alpha and leptin level is decreased and adiponectin level is increased. This all them taken together, they improve insulin sensitivity towards the target tissue, that is the adipose tissue. It also helps in adipose tissue differentiation. So that is another very important part for insulin sensitivity. In the next class, we will discuss in more detail the insulin resistance. That is a very critical problem in case of type 2 diabetes mellitus, especially the insulin resistance. And thiazolidinedione decreases insulin resistance and improve insulin sensitivity. It has also other functions like it decreases gluconeogenesis from liver. So ultimately, again, hepatic glucose production is decreased, and it increases GLUT4 receptor formation in the muscle. So more and more glucose enters the muscle and adipose tissue. So again, this is part of activation of PPAR gamma. So ultimately, the effect of pioglitazone or the thiazolidinediones is to decrease blood glucose level to some extent, but mostly it improves the insulin resistance, improves the insulin sensitivity and decreases the insulin resistance. Next, SGLT2 inhibitors. Now their mechanism of action is very easy to understand. You can see more the blood glucose that are filtered through the Bowman's capsule. It reaches the proximal convoluted tubule and there is a transporter, SGLT2 transporter. You can see this SGLT2. Remember, there is a similar transporter is present in the GI tract also, which helps in glucose absorption. So similar kind of receptor, but it is SGLT2 type subtype of receptor. Its function is to absorb, or better to say reabsorb this glucose into the bloodstream again. So if we can inhibit this SGLT2, then blood glucose will lose and it will increase the urinary glucose concentration. So that is the mechanism. We are giving SGLT2 inhibitors like canagliflozin, dapagliflozin and empagliflozin. They inhibit the reabsorption of SGLT2. So more and more blood glucose will be lost in the urine. So ultimately the concentration in the plasma glucose will decrease. So that is how we can improve the glucose concentration in our body. The benefits are HbA1c level will decrease. HbA1c is the glycosylated hemoglobin. In the next class, we will discuss the importance of HbA1c in the management of diabetes mellitus. It also promotes weight loss and it has very favorable lipid profile level also, and it decreases hypertension. Why? Because if someone loses glucose, so this glucose by its osmotic action also it will draw some water and it will promote more water loss. So that is how it will lose some water also, and it helps in hypertension. So it has slightly diuretic like function in this case, but there are some risks involved also. First is increased genitourinary infection. There is slight increased risk of lower urinary tract infection, mycosis and other kind of infection because of high glucose concentration in the urine. There is slightly increased chance of diabetic ketoacidosis, because you can remember from the last class there was one of the major problem in the diabetic ketoacidosis were the osmotic diuresis due to hyperglycemia. So the same thing, this drug actually promoting this hyperglycemia, the concentration of glucose in the urine, so it will promote more water loss and the situation will worsen. There are some chances of acute kidney injury and risk of amputation, especially the canagliflozin. It has been shown that there in clinical trial that there is slightly increased risk of amputation for canagliflozin and slight increase of bone fractures also. But this empagliflozin and dapagliflozin, they have shown, it has been shown that they have very good cardiovascular benefit also. Not only it helps in diabetes mellitus, but it has some cardiovascular benefits along with that. Now some miscellaneous drug, these are not the drug that we use as the first line drug, but it is, all of them are approved and they act by some artificial mechanism of action, like this bromocriptine. You know that bromocriptine is dopamine receptor agonist, and it is mainly used in Parkinsonism and also in hyperprolactinemia, but it has some action on as an anti-diabetic drug also. It has circadian neuronal activities in the hypothalamus. It acts on that and reset abnormally elevated hypothalamic drive. So it is some relatively atypical mechanism of action. Pramlintide is very important. It is analog of amylin. Amylin is also a peptide synthesized by beta cell and released along with insulin. The function of amylin is to work in the hypothalamic receptor to decrease gastric emptying and to promote satiety. It also inhibits secretion of glucagon. Now amylin has very short duration of action. So if we give this longer acting amylin agonist or amylin analog, that will help the patients of diabetes mellitus. So that is the idea behind the pramlintide. But you have to give it subcutaneously before the meal. And cholecephalum, basically this is a drug for hypercholesterolemia and it is a bile acid sequestrant. So basically it is a lipid lowering agent, but it has been shown that there is some altered bile acid metabolism in case of type 2 diabetes mellitus patients. So if we give this bile acid sequestrant, it helps in glucose metabolism, probably by increasing glucose sensing receptor. So all of these can be used, but they are not in the first line drug. So taken together, these are the main target of anti-hyperglycemic agents: adipose tissue, glitazones, insulin, and to some extent metformin. They act on adipose tissue by increasing the intake of glucose by GLUT4 and also by decreasing free fatty acid release from adipose tissue. Liver, you know that glitazones, insulin, and metformin, all of them works by decreasing hepatic glucose production. Sulfonylurea, glinides, DP4 inhibitor, and GLP-1 analogs, they are all secretagogues. They work on pancreatic beta cell, and some of them also decrease glucagon secretion. SGLT2 inhibitor and insulin, it decreases blood glucose loss. It increases blood glucose loss, SGLT2 inhibitor especially, and decreases blood glucose level. And in the skeletal muscle, it is another target organ like adipose tissue, again glitazones, insulin, and metformin. They act on skeletal muscle. So these are all the targets of hyperglycemic agents, and you have to remember the name and mechanism actions all of them. And in a short, you have to remember some other features like weight, their action on weight gain or weight loss. So you can see metformin promotes slight weight loss. GLP-1 receptor agonist, they cause weight loss. Actually, liraglutide, it is one of the important GLP-1 RA, is a drug approved for weight loss. SGLT2 inhibitor, again it causes weight loss, but thiazolidinediones, it causes weight gain. And along with anything that increases insulin level, like insulin itself has an weight gain property, and sulfonylurea and glinides, they also cause weight gain. Renal and genitourinary, possible benefits of DPP4 inhibitors and liraglutide. Otherwise, you can also give some DPP4 inhibitors like linagliptin. You can see here except linagliptin. So dose adjustment necessary except linagliptin. In linagliptin, you can give safely to patients with diabetes, patients with reduced kidney function. You can give AGI, that is alpha glucosidase inhibitor or thiazolidinediones in renally compromised patient, but you should avoid sulfonylurea and metformin. Metformin you can give if the eGFR is more than 30, but it is better to avoid if it is less than 30. And cardiac profile, GLP-1RA, SGLT2 inhibitor has good cardiac profile. Thiazolidinediones you should avoid in CHF, and otherwise fracture risk, moderate fracture risk again by thiazolidinedione and SGLT2 inhibitor. So ultimately this this diagram or this table shows in a very quick way how the different drugs, the hyperglycemic agents, act in different aspects of diabetes mellitus patients. So you can pause the video and check it thoroughly if you want. And today we have discussed about different oral anti-hyperglycemic agents, their mechanism of actions, their adverse effects, and when to avoid them. Today, next day, it will be the final class of this series, and we will learn how to manage a patient of diabetes mellitus. Thank you for your patient listening. See you in the next class.